everyone. Welcome to the ISES webinar. I'm Dr. Shahid Pervez, Assistant Professor, Indiana University, and I will moderate today's webinar. For those of you who are not ISES members, please consider joining the society, as the society offers many benefits to its members. Please visit our website, www.intelexposurescience.org, to see the benefits of membership. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get to today's presentation. In the upper right side of your computer screen, you will see a control panel. Please note that this webinar is listen-only mode. Submit your question in the chat box. You can type in a question or comment and submit it at any time during the presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So today's speaker is Dr. Jamie Maliker. Dr. Maliker is a professor at the Stony Brook University. Dr. Maliker research contributes to the field of exposure science and environmental epidemiology. He has published over 80 articles on drinking water contaminants, air pollutants, arsenic, cadmium, asthma, osteoporosis, stroke, and different type of cancers. Dr. Maliker will discuss perspectives on an academic job search. He will share ideas for navigating the academic job market as both chair of tenure track faculty searches and as a candidate for tenure track positions. Dr. Maliker?
Thanks, Shahid. I guess just use chat or somehow get in touch with me or Shahid if you have problems hearing or if there are any problems, and we'll figure them out along the way. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I set this up. There's about 10 slides here. It shouldn't take more than 20 minutes to go through the slides, and then I imagine mainly it'll be a Q&A. So let me tell you a little bit about, I guess, my experience and why I guess I have experiences or the types of experiences I have that might be relevant for you. So I have chaired 2 searches for tenure track assistant and associate professors at Stony Brook. I've interviewed for tenure track positions at multiple universities, both before I was a professor, but also some as an assistant or even as an associate professor. I've interviewed. I've had multiple job offers at different times that I needed to negotiate and juggle. And I have a spouse who is also an academic and in a tenure track position at Stony Brook. So I thought all of those experiences could be relevant for you at some point. When I chair a search committee and we look for people at Stony Brook, it can be quite competitive. So Stony Brook is only a program in public health. We're not a school of public health. We don't have academic departments, and we generally search broadly for, research for faculty who will do research and come in and be, good scholars. And one search that I chaired, I think we had 120 applicants. It's for assistant and associate professor positions. Some people are straight out of grad school, some have done postdocs, some are already faculty, some are even tenured faculty at, good universities, where they want a place that might be a little bit more hard money than where they are. So it can be quite competitive. What we look for is, one is that you can write. And part of the way we see that is through peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts where you're a first author, ideally with multiple mentors, like multiple senior authors on different manuscripts. That way we can get a sense that the writing is in fact yours and not just your mentor helping you. We look for strong writing in the cover letter with a clear vision toward your scholarly creativity and productivity, and ideally grant funding, be it a K99 award at the postdoc level, or F31 or F32 awards at the predoc level, or even potentially R awards like an R03 or R21, or small business grant if you've been working for a small business organization. Or we actually had one had one applicant who we recruited who was a co-I on a P award. So he had 5 years of funding when he came in that supported him. I think it was like 25 or 30% of his salary for 5 years through a P award. So that was really nice for him and for us. So those are the things that we look for. We also, of course, require strong interpersonal skills. You have to be a good potential colleague because this is a big commitment, right? You're going to be working with this person and having them part of your group for ideally a long time. And when you present, I think what's important for your presentation to the faculty and to the students is that you show that where your work is novel, how you're pushing the field forward with an awareness of where the field is, your vision for the future. And one other thing I would mention is some presenters occasionally, I would say, overinterpret their results. So you have to interpret your results appropriately. You can have a good hypothesis, which you're testing, but sometimes your hypothesis doesn't pan out, and that's okay. But you need to present it appropriately and not say that you're still, that your findings for your hypothesis if the data don't point you in that direction. So those are some thoughts, about when you're applying, what we look for. In terms of my story, I earned my PhD at Michigan in 2006, and I was going to, the plan was for me to stay in Ann Arbor, so I lined up a position as a research scientist at an academic spin-off while my wife finished her PhD. And this allowed me to submit grant proposals as a PI. And I should say this was prior to K99 awards. So a K99 would have been a nice alternative, but this definitely worked out pretty well. I also did interview for faculty positions that year. I was not successful, but it was a good experience. So I interviewed in environmental health and geography, so both in a school of public health and in a school of arts and sciences. So during that year, that 2006 to 2007, where I could be a PI on grants, I had an R21 proposal funded. I had an R03 proposal scored and revised. I had a small business grant, an R43, funded. I also had a small business contract, SBIR they're called, funded. And I was appointed PI of an existing contract that the group I was with already had with the Michigan State Cancer Registry. So that also was helpful for me. And I published 7 peer-reviewed manuscripts. And I applied for tenure track positions. So that was a busy year. I also would say I also taught. I taught at a small college that was 2 hours away. So I drove 2 hours each day. Not each day. 2 hours each way. Once, I think it was twice a week for a semester to teach. And I also taught in a different semester at the University of Michigan. Again, I believe it was twice a week in their undergraduate program. So now, in terms of the faculty search, because it is hard. You're on the market, you're traveling a lot. There's all these competing needs that you have. There's salary, there's location, there's potentially a spousal hire. It's very difficult to rank what's most important. And I would say we were juggling with this question up until the very end of when we decided. I would say only turn down an offer if you already have a better offer. Otherwise, prolong the offer for as long as possible. You should always negotiate for what you want. Everything is negotiable. But keep in mind that a good share will only give you what's commensurate with other faculty in the department. You don't want to create animosity, so you don't want to negotiate so hard that what you get is different, because that will, that can very easily be bad for you when you're there. And of course, there's different types of faculty positions. So, you know, small college I think of as the small liberal arts colleges. Some are private, some are public. They generally have teaching loads of anywhere from two, so 3 courses a year, to 4 courses a year, to 5 courses a year. So somewhere between 3 and 5 courses a year at these small colleges. They expect you to teach very well, but they do give you a lot of freedom at some of those. More so, they're private, but some are even public that are like that. There's also teaching colleges and universities, so some of those are community colleges, but some are not community colleges, but they still will expect you to teach anywhere from 3 courses a semester, so 6 a year, to potentially up to 10 courses a year. And that's great if that's where you want to end up, but those are hard positions to move away from to another type of university because it's just so time consuming to teach that much. Your teaching load definitely matters, and I would say as important as the number of courses is how much grading and what type of grading. Grading can take a very long time. So if you are grading papers, it's a big difference between grading 3 papers from 20 students to grading 3 papers from 80 students. It's just a lot more work, a lot more time. And of course, the number of different preps that you have matters as well, although I don't think that matters as much as grading. It matters a lot in the beginning. It's a lot of work to prepare different courses the first time. Really, the first 2 or 3 times, it's a lot of work. But after that, it gets easier in terms of the prep. And I'd say some colleagues even prefer to have more different types of courses than to have the same course that they're teaching multiple times, just because it gets a little boring. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's also how much of the salary is guaranteed versus it being largely soft money. The range I saw in 2007 when I interviewed broadly was $62,500 for 9 months on the low end, up to $100,000 for 12 months. And there were some 9-month salaries in there that I think were around $80,000. And then another question is whether or not the institutional environment facilitates K01 awards. I think some places do this better than others. At a smaller program in public health like where I'm at, it's more difficult to find mentors who align well. So it becomes harder to go after K01 awards. Most of our faculty have gone after R21s or R03s first and then R01s. And that's worked pretty well for most of the faculty we've hired. And of course, not all research universities are the same. So if you do want to be at a research university, you have to think about the salary piece like I just talked about, but also these other pieces. Institutional staff support. Is there good staff support for writing grant proposals or for helping you distribute the funds from those grant proposals, setting up contracts, setting up purchase orders, all of those things? I can tell you at a place like Stony Brook, we don't have great support for that. And that makes it harder. It means you have to learn how the process works because it's always changing to some extent. So that's something that's important. Pilot funds, whether or not an institution has money to help you get started to collect pilot data for a grant proposal. Whether or not there are bridge funds, if you had a grant and the grant ended and you're in between funding, but you've got another grant proposal under review that you think has a good chance, will the institution help support any staff that you have that you've hired for the first grant so that you don't have to lose them and then rehire and retrain? And that varies a lot from institution to institution. The degree of local collaboration that's possible. I do environmental health, environmental epi, and exposure science, and there's nobody else on campus who does it. So when I collaborate, I bring that expertise to other projects, but I don't have a lot of collaborators that are directly related to what I do. So my collaborators for that are outside of Stony Brook, and that will vary at different universities. And of course, infrastructure challenges. One place I interviewed, they talked about how the air conditioning broke in a lab and there was no money to fix it. The school didn't have the money, the department didn't have the money, the individual researcher didn't have the money. I think it was a new person there. And as I understand it, it just didn't get fixed. Maybe it took a year. It was really a long time. And that's, in my opinion, not okay, but that does happen. I mean, this phrase, underfunded public university, you will hear, and it is true. I've heard from people who have to bring in office supplies, including paper, to their office. Stony Brook has a School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences that is very well regarded, and they lost power for about 9 days because their buildings are, they weren't made to last 40 years. They were sort of temporary buildings where they're in. So that's very depressing when that happens, right? That you lose power. And if you have a spouse or partner that you're trying to figure out how to make things work, what I would recommend is for an assistant professor position that you have a job offer in hand before you bring up your spouse or partner. The exceptions are if the committee already knows you have a spouse who's looking because they already know you or somebody on the committee already knows you, or if the committee is filling multiple positions and your partner might be it for one of the other positions. In both of those scenarios, I would bring it up at the time of application. It's a good way to recruit spouses is if you have multiple positions open, I would apply to both. If you're a good fit. And different universities are going to be different. Some are better than others about spousal hires. Stony Brook actually is quite good, in part because we're 60 miles outside of New York City. So it's a bit far. So if you're going to move here, they do a good job. Now, for take-home messages, I would say only apply to positions you might actually take. And I know some people will tell you the opposite. Some say apply broadly, apply to everything. And to some extent, that's true in that if you want to get experience, you could do that. But it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of travel, and it's tiring and exhausting. And the time that you're applying or interviewing is time away from doing your research and your scholarship. So I would only apply to positions you might actually take. I know colleagues who feel stuck in positions and they're just not able to get out of them. They're at universities that don't allow them enough time or they've just been unable to get major grants going, and then it becomes harder to move. Try to learn the details about the job in advance. Through informal networks is ideally the way to do this. Trying to understand what the teaching load is, what the salary coverage is, what the climate of the department is, any crazy service responsibilities, right? How well your time is protected for your scholarship. All of those things are good to try to find out, and they're hard to find out. You can contact the search committee chair about some of these things, but sometimes, if you're asking about salary coverage and it's a soft money place, they might not. They might think that means that you're not going to take the job, right? You're not going to be as interested. So you have to be careful. I think it's better to try to get this information through informal networks. And climate of the department is harder to assess directly from a chair of a committee. Ideally, you'll find someone who was in the department once and left, and you could get information from them. In general, put yourself in positions where you can write grant proposals as a PI, where you publish your scientific contributions in good journals. I mean, those are the two things that are going to keep you competitive. And that includes during your dissertation phase, during your postdoc phase, and during your junior faculty phase. Like, those are things that you need to be doing to be competitive and to have options on the table for you. So those are, I'd say that's a summary of what I think. So I'm happy to answer any questions along the way that you have, or anything you want more information about.
Thank you, Dr. Meliker. So we have time for questions. I do not see any question yet from the attendees. So I guess I have some questions. Maybe I would ask you a few questions, and in the meantime, attendees can submit more questions if they have any. So I guess I want to know, what are your biggest challenges, or were your biggest challenges in getting a faculty position when you were in the job market?
I mean, when I interviewed for 2 tenure track positions when right around the time I had defended my dissertation. So the first was at Yale in the School of Public Health in the Department of Environmental Health Sciences. And that was a position that was 100% the first year, and then 75% hard money, then 50, and 25% hard money starting, I think, in year 3 or year 4 and forever. And I met with people during that interview who were research faculty who said that they had years where they actually didn't have any salary coming in. And that is, I think that reality is a challenge in and of itself. I did not get that job offer, but even if I had gotten it, I think I would have treated it as a stepping stone. I don't think I would have stayed. I think it's just a little too crazy. There isn't as much structure, right? I mean, some universities have very large environmental health departments, and there's a lot more infrastructure to leverage things, to be able to maintain funding, I guess, in areas that I would want to do work. So I think that's, the salary bit is definitely a challenge. When I interviewed for a geography position, so that was also later that year, that was at Michigan State University, because again, we wanted to stay somewhat close, ideally, while my wife was finishing up. It would have been interesting had I gotten that, because I probably would have taken that position. And, again, how long I would have stayed is hard to say, but it was a hard money 9-month position in the Department of Geography. So, just thinking about what you want, and it's hard. I mean, to me, that was the hard part. The hard part was figuring out what I wanted, right? Did I want to be at a small liberal arts college where I was teaching really bright students? Did I want to be at a research university where I had a lot more time and freedom to do work? Did I want hard money? How important was hard money? Those were the hard parts. And of course, location, like, where did we want to end up? In the end, it came down to, my wife and I both had offers at the University of Georgia, and I had an offer and she had a promise of an offer at Stony Brook. And promise of an offer is not an offer, but we had to decide whether we trusted the people, and we ended up choosing Stony Brook mainly because of location. We wanted to be in the Northeast. But everybody's going to have different variables that they think are most important for them. And figuring out which those are is hard. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. But, that assumes you get multiple offers, which sometimes we don't all get, right? I mean, I think being PI on an R21 helped me immensely to have multiple offers when I went on the market a year after I defended. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. Get a grant.
And so I guess when you were in the job market, faculty job market, how do you determine that a potential university or school has plenty of resources and infrastructure that you need to successfully carry out your research? I find it extremely difficult personally. Because the only wealth of information that you would have as an external candidate is the website, university website. So you would know, and most university website, I think they try to oversell themselves. So I guess as an external candidate, how would you determine whether a particular school or university has substantial resources and support, both infrastructure wise and collaborators wise? Do we have right collaborators and things like that? Because that's a key for a successful research career. So how do you determine that? Is there a way that we can concretely identify whether a particular school is a good fit for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, collaborators, you can look on the website and then try to meet them when you're there to see if you think you'd get along well and have interests that might overlap. So I think that's an easier part. Figuring out what the institutional climate is and whether there's support for you is a harder question. I think definitely when you interview, asking questions that are specific about, like when you write a grant proposal, like what's the process? Who helps you? Like, is it all you? Do you have staff? Like, what's the staff support like? Similarly, if you get a grant, like what's the process? Do you have to figure out how to pay everybody, or is there staff support to, help you allocate the funds? So I think you can ask those types of pointed questions, and in an ideal way to multiple people, like you would ask those questions, because that'll give you a sense. The more people you ask, the more likely you are to figure out what's true. For those types of things. The other piece that I would suggest is the track record of the program or of the school or of the department. Like, how well do they do at funding, at growing junior faculty into funded scholars? Like, what's the typical path? Do they get KO1 awards? And so that there is this experience in doing that. Do they generally, go after R21s or R03s first or R01s? Like, what is the process by which junior faculty that have come before you have been successful? Because that's probably going to be a model for how you would be successful. So, I mean, those are the things that I would ask, but it's hard to get much information until you visit in regards to that.
Okay. I don't think I have any more questions. So thank you, Dr. Meliker, for an informative presentation. I want to thank you all for participating in the webinar. Shortly, you will receive an email from ISES that will include a feedback form. Please take a minute to provide your feedback. The recording of today's webinar, along with any handouts discussed, will be posted on the ISES website in near future. We hope you will join our upcoming webinar. We will send out a notification to members once registration is available for our next webinar. We hope to see you all at ISES annual meeting in Lithuania this August. Thank you very much.
Thank you.